welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, The Bright Side Girl, and today we're going to be talking about my top 10 books for 2021. So I put a disclaimer in a different video, but I think this one might be going up first, so just in case, I've been kind of MIA for the month of December, and then I got sick around Christmas time. I'm going to be posting a lot of videos back to back over the next week or so because I really want to get these particular videos out. And I figured multiple videos a day is better than not having them at all. So that's what's up with that. So stay tuned for hopefully a lot of content coming over the next week or so. So for now, we're going to talk about my favorite books of 2021. I talked about this in my end of the year reading video, which should be out pretty soon. I actually had I don't want to say a bad reading year because all reading years are good reading years. But compared to years in the past, this is my 5th year making book videos and reading like over 100 books, and this was my worst one so far. So I only read 101 books this year, which again is a ton. 90% of those were audiobooks, so physically I barely read anything. And because of that, I don't have as many favorite books, and I don't have as many split books because I only read 11 physical books total. I don't want to do a top 10 physical and a top 10 audio because my physical would be all of the books I physically read, which is they're not my favorite. So I want to blend the two and make a shorter video. Hopefully next year we can do 2 again. This is my lowest year for 5-star books. I only had 8 5-star reads this year, and 5 of those were rereads. So I was picking some weird things. I'll explain it more in the other video, but I just wanted to say that these are my favorite books of 2021, but they're not necessarily like to die for books. Like some of them are, and some of them are very good, but I didn't have any like real clinchers like I have in years past, so we're gonna work on that next year. So anyway, I'm still excited about these books. I just wanted to let you know that because not all of them are 5 stars. They're a mix of 4 and 5-star books. So they're not going to be in particular order, but I am going to talk about the ones that I love the most a little bit more towards the end. So first up, I'm going to encompass a few series as a whole because my goal this year was to read and finish a lot of series. So one of them, the Ash Princess series, I think I read the first book last year, but I read the next 2, Lady Smoke and Ember Queen, this year. I really loved this series. It was so good. It was one of the only fantasy series I completed this year. The world building was very thorough and wonderful, and it was romantic, and it was like a little bit heartbreaking and really awesome. So this is about a princess whose mother was murdered like in front of her, and she is taken captive by the people that are trying to take over the throne, and she's basically held as their prisoner while they rule her kingdom poorly, and then one day she gets the opportunity to kind of fight back and take back her throne. It's a very minimal way to explain it. There's like jewel magic in here, and there's romance, and there is wonderful characters, and I really enjoyed the whole series. The books were equally good, like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and it wraps up really nicely too, which can be tough. We're going to talk about the Bone Witch series, which is again one of the only other fantasy series I read. I think I read the Bone Witch last year. I might have read it this year, but I think I read it last year. And I wrapped up this series this year. This is a longer series as far as like, it's not long page count wise, but it's very in depth, and the world building is really intense, and it does bounce back and forth a lot. I did this on audio, which I love. The narrator was incredible. I'll list her right here. The only thing I would recommend is that just pay really close attention because you're bouncing back and forth between timelines. A lot of the characters have similar names and things, so it can get kind of confusing, but our main character is studying like bone magic, and she's also learning like almost how to be like a geisha, like how to entertain and dance and do all of these things and be magical, and it's really interesting. And you're getting all these different cast of characters and just so many different interactions and friendships and romance and growing up and dark magic, and I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but this is very underrated. I would just go into it knowing that it is very detailed and a little bit slower. So if you can kind of sit back and just absorb the world, I think you'll enjoy it a lot as well. Then we have the Defy the Worlds, Defy the Fates, Defy the Stars trilogy by Claudia Gray. I really love Claudia Gray's writing. This one is kind of the opposite of the other two. It's definitely a little more simple and easy to follow. It's set in the future. We're in space. We've got robot boy and a rebel girl, and they kind of meet up and they try to like save the world together. And it's all set like on a spaceship and different planets, and so it's got a little bit of like a Firefly vibe to it, but we've got some romance in here. It's got some dystopian vibes. It's just really fun, really fast-paced. I listened to all of them on audio. The narrator was incredible. I had a great time. It was just a really, really fun series. Some sci-fi always kind of makes my list, but I highly recommend this series. Speaking of sci-fi, I recommend Amid Stars and Darkness. So I've only read this book so far. I picked it up randomly at Dollar Tree. I loved the cover. We were doing like a Space Galaxy readathon. I read it physically and I freaking loved it. This one is just like what most people would call like a guilty pleasure read. I think you can read whatever you want, so I don't like that term. But I just super enjoyed it. It's about an alien princess who swaps places with a human girl, and you're on a spaceship and there's aliens and there is romance and there's chaos, and it is just kind of wild and out there and ridiculous, but it was just really, really fun, and the ending was really good, so I cannot wait to read the next one. I have it. I finally ordered it and the third one, so they'll be coming very soon, and I'm going to read them here really soon because I'm so pumped about it. It was just really fantastic. Just thought it was really fun. If you're looking for something to kind of get you out of a reading slump, something kind of silly and romantic, I would definitely check it out. Then we're going to talk about Mr. Dickens and his Carol, which is a last minute addition I was not expecting to add on here, but I had kind of a shortage of amazing books. I read this one like last week just for the Christmas season. I've been meaning to read it for like 2 years now. This is basically a historical fiction based on Charles Dickens' life and writing of the Christmas Carol. It's definitely fiction. There's a lot of liberties taken. It's so good. It ties in the Christmas Carol and all these different elements. Charles Dickens is like down on his luck and he doesn't have money to pay the bills, his books are flopping, and he's supposed to write this Christmas story and he doesn't want to, and he's basically kind of like a Scrooge character himself. He's feeling like frustrated with Christmas and his family and all these things, and then he needs to go and find some inspiration. The ending was really unexpected and it was really lovely. The audio was especially good. I loved the narrator and it was just perfect for the holiday season. If you love Christmas, if you love Christmas Carol, if you love classic books, but this is like so much easier to listen to, highly, highly recommend. Then we have The Lantern's Ember by Colleen Hook. I read this one for my Readathon Not So Scary-a-thon. This is one of the most perfect Halloween reads I've ever read. We have Jack, who's basically like a pumpkin king, and he guards this gateway, and we have our main characters trying to like cross over into this magical world, and there are witches and vampires and pumpkins and ghouls and all kinds of Halloween goodness, and you're going on like this total journey. It kind of has like a Stardust by Neil Gaiman vibe to it, but much more like Halloween-y. There's some romance in here too, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was very pleasantly surprised, and it's made one of my all-time best Halloween book lists now. Then we have Capturing the Devil by Kerri Maniscalco. Finally read this book. Been meaning to read it forever. I read it earlier this year, and this is the last book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, which is a series based on Audrey Rose. She wants to be a forensic scientist, but that's kind of frowned upon because we're in like the 1800s, and all of the Jack the Ripper murders start to happen, and she winds up kind of getting thrown into helping investigate the crime scenes and all that kind of stuff. Each book follows a different kind of plot line, but they all go together, so definitely read them in order. They're not completely separate books. They follow the same characters. They just get put in different situations. I really liked this last book. It was very different than the other three. It was a little bit sexier than the other ones. It had more romance in it. It wasn't like the best finale ever, but I just love the series so much. I love Audrey and all of the characters, and I miss them sometimes because they're so good. This made Kerri Maniscalco like a must-read author for me because I just loved this book so much. I really need to read Kingdom of the Wicked next. Highly recommend this series, and just her writing is so good in general as well, but I really enjoyed this final book in the series. Then we have Strange Sweet Song by Addie Rue. So this one, again, I kind of randomly found at a used bookstore. It was Halloween time. It looked kind of like lightly spooky and atmospheric. I picked it up. I was correct. This is unlike anything I have ever read. It was just so lovely. It was very lyrical and enchanting and magical and romantic, and it's following our main character whose mother was an opera singer that died, and she is going to school to be an opera singer herself, and so she's kind of growing up and learning ways of friendship and romance. The school is set next to this woods that is said to have this like magical cat that has this whole like fable and lore around it, and nobody knows if it's true or not. And I don't want to give too much away, but between the music and the magic and the school setting and everything, it was so good. Definitely a solid 5 stars. I read it physically. I loved it so much. It was really unexpected, and it was just really quite lovely. Then we have How the King of FLFHAME Learned to Hate Stories. I feel a little weird putting this one on here because it's a novella, but I read it twice. I physically read it and I listened to it on audiobook because I loved it so much. This is the novella like after the effects of The Cruel Prince, kind of before and after, all tied into one. If you love the Cruel Prince series, you need to check this out, and you need the physical book because there's pictures and things as well. Of course, by Holly Black. I love the Cruel Prince series. I wasn't sure about the first book, and I hear a lot of people say that, and then I kept reading and then I loved them more and more, and this last one was probably the best one because it ties in things from the past and things that happen in the future. It's so good. If you don't know, somehow it is a story about some sisters that get taken into the fave world. Their parents are killed and they get taken into the fave world, and they have to grow up as humans, and they're kind of bullied and they have to figure life out. And you're following our main character Jude, and she has to deal with all the things in the fave world and the people that she's living with and her family. And then there is a cruel prince and royalty and all these different politics, and it's really great, and I loved this edition. And then we have Winter Song, which I read twice this year, which I never do, and I physically read it and then I listened to the audiobook. This book's not going to be for everyone, but I absolutely loved it. It is magical and lyrical and so romantic. It's sexier than I expected for a YA book. Like, there's some scenes in here and I was like, oh, well, that's fun. And it's basically about our main character lives in a world where there's this magical like underworld goblin king, and her sister gets taken away into the underworld and she has to go and try and rescue her. It's a bit like a fever dream because you kind of don't know what's happening and people are trying to trick her, and there's like little elves and goblins and things and all this weird magic, and it's got like a Beauty and the Beast meets Labyrinth vibe, and it's really good. I didn't love the second book for reasons I can't explain without ruining the first book, but this first one was so good that I loved it. I didn't like the audio as much as physically reading it. I would recommend physically reading it. The narrator was not my favorite. She kind of over dramatized the prose of the book, which was very like lyrical and enchanting, but I feel like the way that she read it made it seem like too much, like too over the top and intense. I enjoyed it because I had already read it, but I don't know if I would have loved it as much if I had listened to the audiobook. So definitely recommend physically reading it. Okay, you guys, those are all of my favorite reads for 2021. Let me know, what were your favorite reads of this year? I need some really good ones to amp up next year. I want to come back a year from now and be raving about my top 10 books of the year and just having like a great compilation of delightfulness. So don't forget to follow on Instagram for some more bookish content and things to come in the new year. I'll be doing some giveaways and things like that as well. And I have lots more videos coming your way soon. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time on The Bright Side.